Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a deeply common and honestly pretty painful family dynamic. We're going to uncover the hidden mechanics behind why one person in a family always seems to take the fall. If you've ever felt like you're constantly the one to blame, or if you've watched this play out in other families, well, what we're about to unpack is going to completely shift how you see human relationships. Let's look at the psychology of the family's scapegoat. To really grasp this, I want you to picture a scene. Imagine a tense family dinner table. The air seems calm, but beneath the surface, there's this heavy, invisible tension. Then, the smallest mistake happens, maybe a spilled drink or a slightly off-colored joke, and suddenly, all that unspoken frustration zeroes in on one person. Everyone's eyes just lock onto them. Why does this happen? Why do families, which are supposed to be our safe havens, suddenly need a scapegoat?
Well, families don't do this on purpose. They unconsciously create this role as a deeply embedded psychological defense mechanism. Every family carries tension, right? Secrets, financial struggles, unhealed wounds. Those things don't just evaporate into thin air. They need somewhere to go so the family can maintain its balance and avoid a total collapse. So they direct their hidden chaos somewhere safe. But tragically, that safe place becomes a person.
The scapegoat literally becomes the lightning rod for all the family's unspoken frustrations. They're cast into a role they never ever asked for. And hey, if you've ever been in that position, it is absolutely crucial for you to hear this. It was never truly about you. You were simply the pressure valve the family desperately needed to keep their fragile balance intact. So let's break down the anatomy of blame. To get why this happens, think of the family as a stage play. Everyone gets a script to keep the family homeostasis running smoothly. You've got the golden child soaking up all the praise. You've got the peacemaker constantly trying to smooth over the conflict. The invisible one who just hides from the chaos. And then you have the scapegoat. Their function is to absorb absolutely everything that no one else in the family wants to touch. Everyone plays their part so the family's story can keep running without anyone actually dealing with the root issues.
Now, what are the actual mechanisms driving this family system?
Let's look at the clinical side for a second. There's a very specific psychological process at work here called projective identification. Basically, this happens when one person essentially becomes the human container for the messy emotions that others absolutely cannot face in themselves. The family takes their own hidden shadows and projects them right onto this one individual. The scapegoat becomes a blank screen for the family's deepest fears and insecurities. Think about it like this. If the parents or the family system as a whole are secretly drowning in unaddressed shame, the scapegoat is painted as the shameful one. If the family is just boiling with repressed anger, the scapegoat is provoked until they react, and boom, they're labeled the angry, unstable one. The scapegoat isn't inherently flawed. They simply become the mirror reflecting what the family cannot accept about itself, its displacement in its purest form.
Which brings us to the concept of the false self.
What does carrying that crushing weight do to a person over time? Growing up under that constant blanket of blame, you often start to internalize the role. You start thinking, maybe I actually am the problem. And that internalized blame follows you right into adulthood. It practically hijacks your nervous system. Former scapegoats learn to constantly expect blame and rejection. They struggle deeply with boundaries. You might find yourself over-explaining or over-apologizing just for existing, or staying in toxic relationships because your nervous system is wired to expect poor treatment. Or, on the flip side, you might develop this fierce, isolated independence, swearing you'll never need anyone again. Both are pure survival strategies. And that's exactly how the false self is born. It's a protective mask. Maybe it's being endlessly polite, super accommodating, or an absolute overachiever. It's built entirely to hide the pain and somehow finally earn a scrap of acceptance. But meanwhile, your real self is totally suffocating underneath. You might spend decades trying to prove yourself through this false mask, desperately trying to earn approval from the very people who forced you into the scapegoat role to begin with.
But hold on, because here is where things get really interesting. Let's look at the scapegoat's hidden power.
I want you to completely flip the script on everything we've just talked about. What if the scapegoat is actually the most powerful person in the family? What if the child chosen to carry all that blame wasn't picked randomly? What if they were selected precisely because they possessed a strength, a deep sensitivity, or this unwavering honesty that actively threatened the family's unhealthy illusion? Often, it is not weakness that makes someone the scapegoat. It's their strength. The exile, the one absorbing the chaos and carrying the shadow, is fundamentally also the seeker. They're the one who flat out refuses to participate in the family's denial. They expose the truth. So the scapegoat is quite often the healthiest member of the entire system. They are simultaneously the victim of the family's dysfunction and its potential healer, because they are the only ones wide awake to the reality of what's happening.
So, how do we get out of this? Let's talk about breaking the cycle. Because this pain forces you into a corner of self-discovery, the scapegoat is usually the one who actually breaks the generational trauma by daring to face the family shadow head-on. It takes 3 huge steps. First, realizing the blame was never yours, it was just projection. Second, asking yourself who you actually are outside of this heavy imposed identity. What do you actually love? And third, building safe relationships where you don't have to walk on eggshells, where you are finally free to just be yourself. This is the classic hero's journey. It requires messy, difficult work to stop trying to earn conditional love and step into your true, authentic self.
I want to leave you with this. You are not the problem. You are the possibility. If you've spent your life feeling misunderstood, blamed, or rejected, remember that your destiny was never to carry someone else's shadow. You have this profound ability to transform that pain into light, into deep empathy and incredible resilience. The world doesn't need you to carry that blame anymore. It needs you to step out of that forced role and become who you were always meant to be. So, what would your life look like if you finally set that heavy mirror down?